in Talking Point, we're taking a look at the manifesto of the All Progressives Congress that was unveiled on Friday, the 21st of October, at the presidential villa by the president and, of course, the candidates in the person of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also the vice presidential candidate, Senator Kashim Shettima. We will be taking a fairly in-depth look, the much that 1 hour can permit us to take. But I do have a sound bite, right, from that particular event. All right, and this is the moment when the candidate himself was making a pledge with regards to the manifesto. I have guests in the studio, but I'm going to just quickly introduce them before we look at that soundbite. In the studio to look at the manifesto of the All Progressives Congress, APC, with me this morning is Chief NIYI AKINSUJU. Chief NIYI AKINSUJU is a veteran journalist and would rather be known or called NIYI AKINSUJU. He is the chairman of Buhari Media Organization and also a member of the Presidential Campaign Council, the media section. A very good morning to you, NIYI AKINSUJU.
Very good morning to you, Kemi. And thanks for the privilege.
And thank you for joining us. We also have in the studio this morning Mr. RETSON TEDHEKE. Mr. RETSON TEDHEKE is a member of the Presidential Campaign Council. He is the MD National Coordinator, Secretary General, Nigeria Farmers Group and Cooperative Society. He is the Deputy Secretary, let me get that right, the secretary actually, of the Agricultural Committee, right, in the Presidential Campaign Council. He is also a chief. He is the Serikin Yaki Gate of in Gate, Nasarawa State. A very good morning to you, Mr. TEDHEKE.
It's an honor being here. I've always loved to be here.
All right, thank you. Okay, so but before we go into the manifesto itself, they say that you don't shave a man's head in his absence. So let's just quickly hear part of a snippet, a sound bite from the unveiling of the manifesto from Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Our dear President, we are with you. We are sure you are leading the way and charting the course. And we are saying today, the renewed hope of this country will be for real. You will look back and be able to smile and be proud of what you built and what you left behind. It is a pledge that this promise that we put here on paper before you all.
Okay, so that was the presidential candidate of the All Progressive candidate saying that the Renewed Hope Manifesto is a pledge. Gentlemen, thank you once again for being in the studio with us. I'll start with you, NIYI AKINSUJU. You are a member of the Media Campaign Council, right? And you're also the chairman of the Buhari Media Organization. What exactly should Nigeria expect with that renewed hope in the manifesto? Because that's actually what the manifesto is called.
Well, yes. First, I think we should also appropriately avail the public of the baptismal name of what you ascribe a manifesto to. It is actually an action plan, is the action plan of the presidential candidate of the APC. And what is interesting and what is very obvious about it is that there's the presidential candidate actually commits to continuity. And in every aspect of that action plan, he referenced the fact of proceeding from what the Buhari administration had done. And to that extent, it is to see the action plan as working on the foundation, laid by the Buhari administration. Well, you have appropriately introduced me as chairman of the Buhari Media Organization. And to that extent, that avails me, over the last 7 years or thereabout, the opportunity to follow in the most passionate way the manner in which the present administration, the Buhari administration, are taking Nigeria through, perhaps, I don't even know if I should just use that word perhaps. In fact, not perhaps. In fact, the most challenging period, in our life as a sovereign nation. Starting from 2014, he assumed office in 2015 when the economy was on a downward slide, and everything was looking negative, for the country. So much that a few months after I got into office, we went into a recession, and from one recession to another recession. Not many countries, survived 2 recessions in succession, but we can only be thankful that we had someone who is committed, who is supercilious when it comes to policy making, and who is dedicated for the love of Nigerian poor, especially, to get us out of those 2 recessions. So, and of course, he also inherited a huge insecurity, insecure country at that time. Since then, we had also seen what he had done, especially in the Northeast, and what he's doing in the Northwest, where banditry, had also erupted, more or less. So the plan as it is to now build on that foundation that had been established by the Buhari administration, either at the level of security, at the level of economy, at the level of legislative provisioning, at the level of unemployment, at the level of judicial transparency and effectiveness, at the level of foreign trade, at the level of exports, virtually every aspect of the economy, every aspect of our existence, as a country, had been attended to and addressed in the most pragmatic manner, in that action plan. And we can start from the first to the last. The 80-page document, starts from security, and it is not the normal sloganeering that the average politician brings to the public space and say, we are going to do this, we are going to do this. It's specifically targets issues and also details how to. Most politicians are good at defining problems and challenges, but they are very deficient at providing solutions. Now, this is what this action plan had availed Nigerians, that yes, we have these problems. The action plan will itemize the problem and then, of course, provide, the solutions. The solution for addressing insecurity, for instance, talks to building on what this government has done, and this government has done so much.
Let's quickly look at what this government has done, because it almost appears that despite the so much that has been done, the citizenry don't feel that way. I'll come to you soon, Mr. TEDHEKE, in a bit.
Yeah, well, if you look at the Northeast, that was more or less under the siege, under the control of the Boko Haram insurgency in 2015. And of course, it's no news any longer that more than 17 local governments in that region, in that zone, were under the direct control of the Boko Haram. A major target of the Boko Haram insurgency was Maiduguri Township. So much that at the point in time, people living in Maiduguri were just living in one small circle of faith because, of the, how do I call it, of the siege, more or less, of the Boko Haram insurgents. But today, we used to have so many numbers of IDPs. We used to have so many issues around bombings and all that, and ambushes and all that. But today, the average Borno State indigene would be thankful to the Buhari government.
As a matter of fact, for the first time, I think in 7 or 8 years, they did have an Independence Day parade in Borno.
Thanks for that intervention. So it tells you the kind of engagement that had gone on there. But it just didn't happen. Of course, the first 2-3 years were challenging. These are kind of terrorist engagements that even our security forces were not prepared for, were not trained for. So the coming of a former army general helped, restructure the security apparatus and architecture as it were. But more than that, while Nigeria lacked the right kind of arsenal, before 2015, commencing effectively from 2016, the kind of acquisition in terms of platforms that had been acquired by this country is huge. So much that, yes, as of 2021, Nigeria was rated as the 35th most powerful nation in terms of arms and ammunition in military firepower. But we are believing that by the time they do the ranking for 2022, we should be going near 26, 27 because of the kind of ammunition, the kind of firepower the country had acquired under the Buhari regime. We can also go to the coastal lines where before 2020, Nigeria had become more or less a pariah in the maritime industry. So much that vessel owners coming into this country will charge us extra because of the kidnapping and other criminalities of piracy and all that, on our coast. But now we have been certified as a secured coastal line by the IMOs.
It will definitely be a good time to have you come in again to discuss the Buhari administration at length. But let me quickly go to Mr. TEDHEKE, who's the Deputy Secretary of the Presidential Campaign Council, the Deputy Secretary Agriculture in the Presidential Campaign Council. Mr. TEDHEKE, you are a farmer. I don't want to put the prefix I usually put when we are off air, on it so that they don't come and meet you. But then I would want to find out from you. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has said that he will build on the legacies of the current government. As a farmer, a practicing farmer, what are some of the legacies of this government and what are you looking for? I also know that you are the chairman of the Agbado Evolution, but let's start with that. What are some of the benefits in agriculture that you as a farmer gained or got from this particular government before we move into how Asiwaju intends to intervene with regards to agriculture in the manifesto?
One of the strongest activities or result from the Buhari presidency is investment in agriculture. When he came in 2015, one of the things he said was Nigerians should head to the farm. And I remember then everybody coming at him and saying, look, this is the 21st century. This is 2022. Why are you telling Nigerians to go to the farm? You cannot have over 200 million people sitting on over 60 million arable hectares of farmland, and you will not go to the farms. And so between 2015 and today, the agricultural component of the Nigerian economy has more than doubled. And not just that, the export component has grown massively, and investment of the government in rural agriculture has increased tremendously. Now, you see, I often say that when nothing did before, if you put something there, it could be like say you don't do much. But the foundation has to be created. And Buhari has created the foundation and driven Nigeria to a level where we can all look at agriculture as a source and the strength of real economic development in Nigeria. Now, it is not just seeing what he has done. It's looking at the foundation and asking yourself, what is it that we can do and make it better? And if you look at the manifesto,
yes, it says here,
talking about finance.
Let me just quickly say something. It says here, agriculture plants the right seed, feed an entire nation.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Now, if you look at it, one of the biggest challenges we have had in agriculture over the years is lack of basic rural infrastructure. People talk about the challenges of waste in Benue. You talk about the challenge of warehousing, the challenge of farmers not being able to access market at the right time. People also lay too much emphasis on export of raw materials. No. What Asiwaju is saying, and when he talked about the Agbado and cassava position in 2019, what he was saying was really clear and simple, and that is articulated in the manifesto. What he was saying was this: you cannot have 200 million people with an average age of 19 years old, and you will be having an insecurity problem. What you do is deploy significant amount of your youth, train them, and deploy them into the armed forces where they have jobs. And not just that, you then deploy a lot of rural Nigeria into a productive process. A process where our rural communities becomes hub of industrialization. And the reality is that there is no nation on earth today, except the likes of Hong Kong, very few, that did not develop through the agrarian process. So he is looking at what you have, not stories, not talking about exports. Not talking about export when all you have done in your life is imports. So he is saying that, look, why don't we go into what was working for Nigeria then and can work even for the next 100 years? For example, I'm going to give a very key example. Why not look at rubber from the south? Look at cocoa, reinforce the impact of cocoa in the southwest, and then look at palm oil or palm trees in the south and the southeast. And then build industries around these products, these agro products, that on their own have the capacity of creating millions of jobs over the next decade. And when you look at them, what are the challenges that they're likely going to face? Like I said earlier, you have the challenge of rural infrastructure, you have the challenge of financing. Why don't you structure financing for farmers in such a way that they can become more productive, they can have the right seedlings, they can have the right machineries, they can have the right vocational education, and then you utilize all of those to ensure that agriculture develops in the Nigerian state. So he is looking at the solutions from the foundation, or building on the foundation that Muhammad Buhari has started and stabilized. And like he said, see, we are people that loves to hammer. No nation grows with the hammer ideology. Too many of us expect miracle in the economy. Guy, where you walk from? For decades, we were a wasteful nation without the ability of saving. We refuse to save. We refuse to build infrastructure. We refuse to commit resources towards financial discipline. Now, your craze of yesterday don't begin worry you today. I understand.
Mr.
Don't begin worry you today. Now, so what needs to be done is follow the foundation, build on what is already available, and sustain progress so that tomorrow can be better for our people, particularly farmers.
Thank you very much, Mr. TEDHEKE. I do understand that you are practicing Ruga farming in Gati. I will go into that in a bit. Let me quickly talk to NIYI AKINSUJU. Mr. AKINSUJU, one of the things that people say, is the fact that when the Buhari government, for example, was coming into power, it came in with a lot of goodwill. Many people do not believe that the APC, for example, has, used that goodwill or put that goodwill to good use. And they feel today that it has been eroded somewhat. And that is why, a few people say, we want to change or something like that. In your own opinion, what would you say went amiss between then and that feeling, so to speak, in the society?
No, nothing had gone amiss. It is a democracy. People have, some people who trend towards a particular direction, some towards another direction. And to that extent, you allow people to freely hold their opinions. The truth of the matter is the Buhari won the election in 2015. A referendum on his performance was conducted in 2019 during his re-election, and he won that re-election convincingly. So to a large extent, it's actually a validation of what the Buhari administration had been able to do. Now, going into 2023, we are sure that, because again, we will not be able to validate whatever may be the conjectures or speculations around the administration until we go through that election. But we are sure that most Nigerians are not given to frivolities, because the important thing is that the government is touching people. Despite global headwind, we are not saying that things are right. But just as I opened earlier, that the administration will be the first administration that over a period of 7 years was contending with one challenge or the other, starting from the economy to security and all that. And these are challenges that had no roots in any way to policy failures, within the country. Most were precipitated by international global issues. And to that extent, if we had been doing business as usual, we would have been in a more terrible, horrible situation now. We would have been worse than Venezuela, for instance. But because we have a man who had a focused planning intendment, he had been able to pilot us through this challenging period. At no time until recently did we have the price of crude oil pass $70 before 2018. And we are talking of a sovereign nation that up till now earned less than $200 billion starting from 2015 to 2022 as we are now. When an administration between 2011 and 2015 earned more than $380 billion and still borrowed more than $63 billion. And yet, that administration, or the lines of that administration under another party at that 2015 could not point to a significant thing of achievement, either in terms of road construction, in terms of electricity power provisioning and all that. The only thing people on that other side will tell you is that rice was sold at 7,000 or 8,000 naira per 50 kg. And we asked them, if it had been now, when India, one of our major sources of importing rice, had decided to increase at base, the price of rice. If Thailand, one of our major sources of importing rice, had also increased the price, the export price, and we have found ourselves in this bind where dollar had also become short because we're not earning as we're earning from crude oil. What would have happened to the price of a bag of rice? We'll be looking at more than 100,000 naira for 50 kg by now, if we had not had a Buhari government engage agriculture the way he had engaged it.
It's interesting you say this, because I do know that during the pandemic, many of the countries who export agricultural produce, locked their borders because nobody knew what will happen with regards to the pandemic. In any case, you're listening to Citizen FM 93.7. This is the Super Citizen Talking Point. It is 29 minutes downside 9. My name is Kemi Asekun, and I have in the studio with me NIYI AKINSUJU, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization, and also a member of the Presidential Campaign Council of the All Progressive Congress, and Mr. TEDHEKE, who is a practicing farmer, and also the Deputy Secretary of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. I will come back to you, Mr. AKINSUJU. I don't want to talk about the media perception and handling, of the information that the citizenry were getting from the Buhari government, but then I want to look at the manifesto again. It says here, the economy and the approach of prosperity. It talks about the structural model upon which the national economy will be built. However, what many of the, people who are on the other side, like you said, talking about rice, what price did you buy it and what price did you not buy it? But some people also talk about the difference in the dollar. the amount you're going to buy it officially and the amount you can sell it unofficially. I don't know. What does I see the manifesto says something about fiscal policy. What are the things to expect with regards to that?
Thank you very much. Now, what that aspect of the action plan is talking about principally is what we use to anchor our budgeting process on. Up to today, we anchor our budgeting on what we call the medium-term expenditure framework, which define the number of projected quantity of crude oil that we will sell, over the next 3 years, and with emphasis on the next 1 year in the budgetary cycle, and an anticipated price benchmark that will be. If you have been following the budgeting process, you'll be hearing of the minister first presenting the MTF, the medium-term expenditure framework, and there will be a lot of noise around that. No, we are expecting to sell 2 million barrels of crude oil a day at perhaps $70 or $80 per barrel and all that. And that becomes the benchmark on which we structure our budget. But Asiwaju is saying now that there's a need to proceed from that. That rather than target or anchor our budgeting system on dollar, let us anchor it on our own domestic capacity to spend money, so that we will now start looking at how do we spend money on infrastructure and other activities that will produce more jobs, that will create more jobs, that will create more wealth, So it's like moving from one model to a higher model. Now we have capacity. Nigeria has capacity to earn and generate so much revenue. So rather than looking principally at the crude oil market with its vagaries, and of course its danger, because you don't know when the price will crash. Price crashed in 2014, and for a long time we could not get ourselves until Buhari was able to take us out of recession. So what we are now doing now with this is we'll look at how much would we need to construct roads. How much would we need to provide 25,000 megawatt of power? How much would we need to construct dams, electric power generating dams and all that? I will now determine how we are going to generate that within the domestic economy, so that we can at any point in time give testimony to the capacity of our domestic economy to provide for these needs. That exactly is what that budgetary new budgetary model is talking about.
Thank you very much, NIYI AKINSUJU, for that one. Let me come to you, TEDHEKE. Nigeria still practices its agriculture in ways that many countries across the world do not practice. When the Buhari government, for example, came up with a Ruga plan to end the herders-farmers clashes, there was a lot of uproar in the country, with regards to that. But I do know you're practicing Ruga. You're the Deputy Secretary of the Agriculture Committee of the Presidential Campaign Council, and with your own personal practice of that form of Ruga. First of all, I think you should break down that Ruga thing to us. Then we will now look at how Nigeria can practice agribusiness as against agriculture that we are practicing right now.
Okay. I'm the secretary of the Agro Commodities Directorate, not deputy secretary.
Okay. I don't know why I keep calling you deputy secretary. It's crazy. I apologize.
Now you see, one of the biggest challenges of agriculture in Nigeria today is that we're too sentimental about our practice and our approach. Ruga has never been a problem. I often say that the American cowboy and the Fulani herdsman are one and the same person. The difference, yes. The American cowboy is simply the American cattle header, but he's still on back of cow. And he built an industry around cattle. The cowboy music are all rural it's a rural industry developed around agriculture, and it's over $400 billion today. We can do the same thing, but Nigerians always want quick solution to everything. You cannot tell people who headed their cattle all their lives to immediately move into a ranch. You need government to come in and create hybrid ranch, which is exactly what we build.
What's a hybrid?
Now, hybrid ranch is you can open graze, you can put the cow in a place where you take care of them so that they will not become destructive. But then you need to create a corridor. You need to have the land. One, you build infrastructure, basic infrastructure, amenities for the farmers to be able to utilize when there is need. You have hospitals, you have sport facilities, you have residential area, you have farm, you have processing plant, you have all of them in place. It's similar to the kibbutz model in Israel, where everything is there, and then you also have schools in those places. When you do that, cows, during the dry season, when the cows need to migrate down south to feed, because the north is drying up and the south literally remains wet all year round, you can put those cattle in a place where you manage them and government charge them a fee to be able to provide the services they need. You will reduce the conflicts and the clash between crop farmers and herders, because both of them are farmers. So that was what we built in Nasarawa. We started the model in 2017, and we have not had a single farmers herders conflict in the whole of Kokona, particularly in and around Gate, since 2017, because it works. So like I said, you have to evolve a process. Now, when you say that the way we practice agriculture is literally crude and cannot create the jobs we need in the 21st century, that's not correct.
Okay.
You know,
but we still do seasonal farming.
Yes,
Doesn't that worry you?
We do. Look, we do. Okay, so what do? You make it better. However, if you want to, you can't tell the man in the village to be using drone to farm. That's wrong. He won't be able to utilize them. You can't even push tractors. Can't spend one single 125 horsepower John Deere full option tractor. It's about 40 million naira. Okay, I mean, how many local people will be able to operate that? You can look at the model that work in East Asia, Thailand.
Let's look at that model.
What did they do? They broke down the machineries for agriculture to the very minutest of process, so that the local and rural people can utilize them. So you see your Okada, for example, you have Okada with plowers. You have hand. What do you call this machine? Those hand harrowers that the local person can utilize, can fix, can maintain, and they can use that to cultivate 1 hectare at a time, 2 hectares at a time. And once you increase productivity with the rural people, you will increase the result of agriculture from rural Nigeria. Most of what comes out of Thailand as foreign rice is produced in rural Thailand. Are you getting it? And what do? They don't use the big tractors that we all use here. And what Siwaji is trying to do with the manifesto is provide the basic infrastructure that is needed in rural Nigeria. What is needed is basic infrastructure. I often use the example of Innocent. If you decide today that Innocent, if you give them the drawing, the outline to design tractors that are on Okada, okay, that Okada can use for planting, for harrowing, for harvesting, and so on and so forth, and you're selling 40 million Okadas every year, agro Okadas every year. Do you know the impact of that in the economy? So you are localizing productivity, you are educating your people on that localized structure, and developing your country from within. The problem we are having today is that we're chasing the dollar. You see, what most countries in East Asia did was they stopped chasing the dollar, they create local capacity. Then the dollar started looking for them. When you do that, you increase the value of your currency, and then make your economy better. And that is what we need to do with regards to agriculture. So it is not, we should not look at all these fancy YouTube videos and say, no, this should be done in Nigeria. No. The first issue you have is rural Nigeria is massively uneducated. They don't have the literacy level to become smart when it comes to modern agriculture. So you create a blend of the two with what you call your extension workers, with those who understand the system, and then build a structure where the local people are able to utilize the facilities and the resources available, and produce, then over the costs of production, as they become better in what they do, you improve the machineries. Not just improving the machineries, you add more of them to the workforce. Not just doing that, your country becomes more productive. Not just doing that, dollar begins to come after what you are producing locally. But for as long as you are chasing dollars, and I tell most of these banks, when they call us for meeting, and they're talking about how you can earn forex, I say you shouldn't be thinking about how you can earn forex. Think about how you can grow forex, grow the Nigerian economy, so that forex can come after you. So from the Ruga to the massively the agri sector, the process is to evolve a system that sees Nigeria first, Nigeria only, and Nigeria always. And that is how you grow.
Thank you very much. We will look at, commodity exchange, which is written there in the manifesto with you in a bit. But let me quickly go to NIYI AKINSUJU. It's action plan. We're used to calling manifesto. So I keep saying that, but then it's the action plan of the All Progressives Congress presidential campaign. Here it talks about fighting corruption. It talks about inefficiency and waste in government. You are currently in government in your capacity as the chairman of the Buhari Media Organization, right? And one of the things that many Nigerians know, but many of us are willing to talk about, is that excessive, the bloating, let me call it the bloating of our civil service. Our civil service seems to be currently over bloated and takes quite a a good chunk, right, of whatever revenues that we make, as a nation. And here it's talking about fighting corruption. I don't know. How do we marry that? One of the epidemics we have in the civil service are also ghost workers across the states. What are some of the things to expect with this action plan?
I think we should also go back to the legacy issue first. The legacy solution to the challenges you have profiled, being that we had an IPPIS that was introduced into the payment system for civil servants. The first 6 months of the application of the IPPIS solution, more than 6,000 ghost workers, were identified and of course deleted from the system. And again, going beyond that, you also had a situation where I think about 3 or 4 months thereafter, you also had the same numbers of people that identified and deleted. To a large extent, the IPPIS had worked, and that was also the concern of the federal government when the ASU, university lecturers, insisted they have to have their own payment platform away from the IPPIS, because the IPPIS had shown, to a large extent, to have capacity. Now, talking about overbloated civil service, to a large extent, compared to where we are coming from, I won't say that we have an overbloated civil service. To a large extent, too, while in the past, before 2015, agencies, ministries, and departments of government can recruit at their will, and of course, what we had, secret recruitment, where nothing will be heard outside. There will be no announcements or adverts, announcing or pronouncing, the process of recruiting new people. The president made it a point of policy and told anybody that was going to recruit that it has to be announced. It has to be in the public space, and that is when such recruitments would be seen to be legal. Some MDAs did that in breach of what the president directed, and of course I know, as a matter of fact, that some months after, the president cancelled those kind of recruitments when they were brought to him. So to a large extent, that structural approach, transparent approach to recruitment is essential. And well, the truth also is that we don't believe that government should be the provider of jobs and employment to every Nigerian. The important thing for us is to create that enabling environment. Agriculture, as he has been talking about, businesses as Nigerian love, entrepreneurship, all create an enabling environment that you have entrepreneurs build structured businesses in a way that it can open and adapt to employment, capacity. What we have in Nigeria as of now is and I think there's a need for Nigeria to be open-minded about this. As at 2020, we have more than 41 million registered micro, small, medium enterprises. In 20, and all of them were paying tax, But when President Buhari came in and observed all this, in the 2019 Finance Act, he gave directive that any company that is earning revenue lower than 25 million naira annually should be exempted from paying tax. And the Nigerian tax threshold is 30% of revenue earned. So what it means is that by giving that incentive, whatever a micro or small business owner is making, he can, put back into his business and of course grow that business until when it is above 25 million.
It's important to know that or maybe let me just ask, that must have also reduced government's revenue, wouldn't it?
No, not exactly, because again, if you look at the revenue earned from taxation in the last 8 months, taxation had provided larger revenue even than our traditional crude oil sources. So what that tells you is that more efficiency is being brought, to the collection of taxation, and again to a larger extent, the companies that are paying are also doing well, because companies that are not doing well will not have the capacity to pay tax. And that's what we tell our friends on the other side, that there is an enablement of companies in Nigeria now, that there is a willingness to pay. Yes, we accept the fact that the conditions are challenging, but to a large extent, we have a government in place that have been able to deploy necessary policies in a way to assuage these hard conditions, and in such manner too that the companies are returning good profit. It is when you return good profit, what you call your gross profit. It is from your gross profit that you earn, that you now have your profit after tax, after paying tax. It means that if the FIRS is earning so much, it means that the companies that are paying those taxes are doing very well.
Thank you very much, NIYI AKINSUJU, for that. We're coasting home now. It's about 12 minutes to go. Well, maybe make it 10 minutes to go. And you're listening to Citizen FM 93.7. This is the Super Citizen Talking Point. My name is Kemi Asekun. I have in the studio with me NIYI AKINSUJU, Chairman, Buhari Media Organization, and of course a member of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. I also have in the studio with me Sarikin Yaki Gate, RETSON TEDHEKE, and the secretary of the APC Presidential Campaign Council Agriculture Committee. Okay, so I looked at that agriculture, the part of Agric, in the action plan. And it talks about commodity exchange. That's not a part that many Nigerians are used to on a large scale, so to speak. So I'll say, kindly break this down for us, and how can young people who are listening right now, take advantage of that if they're not farming?
One of the biggest challenges of the Nigerian agricultural space today is proper management of our produce. We're having a lot of challenges doing that. And it's also affecting farmers across the country. And I'm going to use example of a lot of this country in the West. My guy has said that government should do very little and create an enabling environment. Yes. But one of the things that government must not fail to do is to have control over the raw materials you need for reproduction. The Commodities Board and the Commodities Exchange process are necessary to ensure that people are not taking advantage of rural farmers who don't have the knowledge of the process of pricing as well as the process of warehousing. Now, you see, what we produce, one of the things that helped us with regards to COVID-19 is because we produced food massively under General Buhari. If we were not producing, if agriculture was not a mainstay of his government, we would have suffered. Because when the borders were shut, where will you see food? And so what our principal Tinubu is trying to introduce is to try to introduce uniformity in the commodities process. One of the challenges you have today is people come to rural markets with huge money, mop up whatever these guys have, warehouse them, and they sell them off later at exorbitant price, affecting reproduction with, I'm a rice miller, for example. So you begin to chase rice, you can't find them, and somebody with money has kept them somewhere where he can sell them at crazy prices. Now, two things are going to happen. One, you are going to begin to have government finance, maybe not manage, the private sector can do the management, but government finance warehouses and silos across the country. Well, what you then do is, at the time of production, you have you cap the pricing. The board will be able to give you an idea of what the prices are, so that they can manage the grid within the system, eliminate
manage. Let me just take that again. Manage the grid
within the system, yes, and help the rural farmers to keep planting. What some of these countries do is simple. Is when there is excess production, government mop up from the system and pay them and mandate banks to pay them at a certain cap rate so that they can keep producing. Now, but the problem we have here is that because the farmer is usually always in need, when it is time, when immediately finish producing, he's going to rush to sell it to the highest bidder, and within a couple of months, he's in need of resources and the capacity to become productive again. The commodities board is going to eliminate some of those challenges, create a level playing field for most of the rural farmers, give them the ability to be able to actually complain before that board that, look, this is the challenge we're having here. This guy's pricing us out of the market. You give the small players a room to play. And like you said, if you don't give the small players a room to play, give them an enabling environment, the challenge you are going to have is they will not produce. And your smallest players are usually your most important players. Because the two people they're employing here, three people they're employing here, by the time you add that up, MBAs don't look at those statistics. MBA has never come to the farm to ask me how many people am I employing. But there are more than 500, there was time I was employing over 500 Nigerians working. So imagine people like us who are small scale farmers and who are into reproduction, but the MBAs don't come to you to ask you about these statistics. So the commodities board is going to be able to create that feed, like I said, where you eliminate the corruption in the system, create a structure that across all the states and the regional level, and build an agro process that encourages rural Nigerians to keep farming, gives access to raw materials for manufacturing with the millers across the country, and also to a point regulates what we export. Now think about it this way. People tell you, the American Circle will tell you government has no business in business. Let me close it by saying this. I have no business in business. When US was having problem with China, what did they do? The US literally bailed out soya beans farmers with $60 billion United States dollars. So if government has no business in business, why are you bailing out farmers? They're bailing out farmers because they need farmers to keep producing. Most of the time they buy from these farmers, provide them with support funding, and they do what? And then allow that they are able to control the international market by selling to who needs it. That is exactly what the Commodities Board can do.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. TEDHEKE. We have to go soon, but before we go, I will need to come to Mr. NIYI AKINSUJU. Power. Without power, a lot cannot be done, so to speak. And one of the, even though, we've had so many governments come in to say, we will fix power, we'll fix power, we'll fix power, we still do not have constant and consistent electricity in Nigeria. And many businesses depend on that. I see here that the manifesto says power, the way to a brighter Nigeria, eliminates estimated billing, generation and transmission targets, renewable energy plan, support for domestic manufacturing of electricity meters. But some people feel that the power situation is like a masquerade that cannot be tamed.
It can be tamed, and it will soon be tamed. The sitting president as of now, had even promised that by the time he's leaving office, by God's grace, we'll be doing close to 25,000 megawatts of power. And that is because there had been an ongoing engagement with the Siemens of Germany that had also actually brought in their facilities and their machines and plants.
Why did it take this long? It took about 7 years.
These these are machines, plants that you don't buy across the desk, around the counter. You know, they have to be prepared. They have to be customized. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years. We are lucky because we are not going through middlemen. It's a government-to-government transaction.
Does that come cheaper?
It's come cheaper. Because if you are going through middlemen, you know how many numbers of middlemen in between that will be topping up and all that. So you are not going through that. Of course, most of the projects General Buhari had, delivered in Nigeria had always been government to government, because it has no interest in earning extra commission from whatever transaction is involved in. So we have this cement thing that we are assured would, of course, deliver on the promises of power. And why are we saying it? Historically and up to now, Nigeria has capacity to generate 12,000 megawatt of power, always to generate. But the problem had been, how do you now cap out the generated megawatt of power and then, of course, transmit and distribute? So immediately what the cement deal is going to do is to be able to capture that capacity that we have and transmit and distribute. Then, of course, start building on increasing generation and transmission. If you look around you, if you watch the news, constantly you'll be hearing how power lines are being upgraded. Those are transmission lines, you know. The distribution companies too are also being encouraged to enhance their capacity to distribute. And that document has become so transparent. This action plan, for me, is a document of transparency. It is not hiding or deceiving anybody, because it says specifically that the discourse will be encouraged to collect tariff reflective, cost-reflective tariff for power. Now that tells you the importance
Gentlemen,
of pricing.
We have to go. It's an 80-page document. It's going to be impossible to exhaust it in 1 hour. But then I must say a very big thank you to you, NIYI AKINSUJU, for being here and also, enlightening us on some of the Buhari administration's strides and, of course, the action plan that has been put in place. Many thanks to you, TEDHEKE, a very good friend of mine, by the way. I will not call you the billionaire, but I have done that. That's our package for the day. He's not a billionaire, but in farming, in land, he is actually a billionaire with regards to that. That's how we call it a day today on the Super Citizen Talking Point. I do hope that this conversation will continue, as we will bring in more other people to also look at the different manifestos of the different parties as they do come out. Tomorrow on the Super Citizen Talking Point, by God's grace, we will be looking at the Ethiopian Air domestic airline deal, with a veteran airline administrator, Mr. Yemi Dada, on the show. Please make it a date with me. And don't forget, in a few minutes, it will be time for Insights with Lawrence. I am Kemi Asekun.